Like, just stop all of that. I don't see the benefit to that, but I do see those people in some cases selling books, selling admittance to retreats, which doesn't seem very enlightened to me.
Do you have a series of practices yourself? Do you meditate, or do you have any kind of personal mindset management stuff? Or are you naturally quite equanimous? And if so, have you had to step any of those up this year?
I made it a solid 4 months meditating this year, and I acknowledged that I really liked it. It was good. But I keep starting it, and then I just can't keep consistent with it. So I would love to say that I meditate, and you can probably find. I think there was a few podcasts in the middle of that 4 month period where I thought that this is who I am now. It's not. So unfortunately, that did fall away. I don't know how much of a problem that is. I'm trying to self-evaluate. I do think I know that it helps me. And when I go through periods where I have high anxiety levels, or I can't manage my thoughts, or it's negatively affecting my sleep, that is something I lean on. But I will say that I do have a lot of other ways of being able to quiet the noise and try to look inward and be a little more self-aware. I think I am pretty self-aware, and I've learned some tools in therapy that I've been through in the past to not put a ton of value on my thoughts when they're of a certain flavor, I guess would be the way I would describe it. And I also have very supportive people around me in my circle of friends and family. So I have people I can talk to when I need to. I do exercise regularly. I have a very kind of ritualistic life in the way I eat and the way I train. So I think that probably brings me some solace, even if I'm not necessarily always doing structured quiet time. And
I remember you recommended Brené Brown's Gifts of Imperfection to me several years ago, and she's another one that if you could buy stock in Brené Brown, you'd be doing great now. But that was a fantastic one. I bought a copy for my mum as well.
That's a really great book. Yeah, I thought I'm glad that stuck with you as a good book recommendation. That's cool.
Sure. I think what Johnny and I find with meditation is that when you're in the groove of it, you almost forget how much you used to suffer, and you only notice the effect of meditation when you stop. And then you're like, oh, I've had a really crap couple of weeks. And you're like, that's what's happened.
Yeah.
It's interesting so I think meditation, like morning routines, that sort of journaling, that kind of advice, I think there's this assumption that people because it's like all successful people meditate, all successful people have these practices. But actually, I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone who is a business owner that people would have heard of who does any of them. And it does make you, like, Menno was very, like, quite damning of it, not of meditation specifically.
I think a lot of this is actually pseudo-productivity. He meditates in the evening, though, doesn't he? He just said doing it in the morning is the problem.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair point.
Have you been following Frank Yang recently?
No.
So you know who he is, presumably, like one of the OGs in fitness YouTube.
He's the guy who
squats.
came out with who is the ab guy on YouTube? I'm forgetting his name now.
Six pack shortcuts.
Yeah, who is that? Mike Chang. Sorry,
that's it.
Yeah.
So Frank was on.
Oh, Frank Yang he did like almost comedy on
very
YouTube.
artsy.
Yeah,
He'd get like a black dildo on the ceiling, and he'd get kicked out of gyms.
He's the guy at the end of
like lick it at the top and stuff.
Yeah.
I think Matt Ogus had him at the end of every video for quite a while.
Yes.
He's the guy who like runs up to the
deadlifts and then says MFer. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And yeah, I know him through Matt's videos.
So, Eric, I would implore you to have there's two things I think we need to send you at the end of this. One of them is that, and the other one was the video of the guy with Ernie who had the hip operation. And for anyone listening, if you've seen either of these,
very strange.
So, Frank Yang has taken his kind of quite obsessional personality and just driven it into meditation for the last couple of years. And I think he's accumulated 7,000 hours. So he's been doing 2 or 3 hours a day. And he's now had a fundamental shift in his consciousness. And he's been documenting it. And it's so fascinating to see.
Wow. I wonder if he's going to use that to launch a new, like, dildo-looking kind of mindfulness program. Or
I hope so. I'll be first in the queue.
No, but in all seriousness, I think that's awesome. And I think I've always been a little resistant to the enlightenment pathway through meditation. And I I do believe it's really good to get to a point where you accept yourself for who you are and you have a little more agency in yourself, you have self-awareness. But I think a lot of the reason why a ton of people in business and productivity circles do meditation is because they're the type of person to keep turning over stones. And there is very little downside and most only potential upside in doing meditation. And it's mindfulness has a lot of science behind it. And but I don't think for the average person it's necessarily going to be like a huge game changer. I think it can be. I think it can be, and I could see why it would work for someone like Frank Yang. I obviously like there's probably a lot going on there. Finding some way to quiet the noise and be a little more centered. I don't think anyone's surprised that was beneficial.
So are you saying that if someone goes down the route of like I'm chasing enlightenment, it's almost like a recreational person who like goes for a jog, getting into some like underground bodybuilding gym and ending up squatting 300 kilos and like being on loads of gear and it's whoa, hang on, how did I end up here? Like it's not the track that they intended on.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that because that's a very specific comparison. But I guess what I'm saying is that I have been exposed to and been around and seen the whole chasing the concept of enlightenment, which is always an interesting one. It's that you always have it, it's always there, and the fact that you're chasing it is preventing you from getting to it, and you need to just let go so that you can be present. And while I agree with that to some degree, because I think that is true, I feel like there has become a hierarchical cottage industry and religious association with it that's just new agey spiritualism that is none of that's necessary in my mind to see the potential benefits from meditation. And I think ironically, some of that whole paradigm is part of its own problem. And it even acknowledges that, but carries on in that way. This guru we follow says he or she is not special, that they've just achieved a level of self-awareness. So I'm going to follow them. They tell me not to follow them. Oh, I'm learning. Like I just stop all of that. I don't see the benefit to that, but I do see those people, and not in all cases, but in some cases, selling books, selling admittance to retreats, which I don't know, doesn't seem very enlightened to me.
There's a lot of exploitation in the guru world, financial and sexual, and it's all, yeah, it can get a bit dodgy.
It creates this, I think there are parallels to training where, so I was recommended by a friend like a year or so ago to have a meditation coaching session with this guy who's a meditation teacher. First time I'd experienced anything like that, and I was like, I've done this many sessions of meditation, don't really think I experience much. And the analogy he used was like, if somebody came to you and said, I've done 30 training sessions and I'm not leaner yet, like what would you say to them? Like, and I think it creates this, as you're saying, I'm meditating, therefore I should be moving towards this thing, when actually it's just something you could do every day if you wanted to as a practice. But yeah, it's one of those things that I think like a lot of habits that have very long-term benefits and short-term can be not that great, hard to stick to.
Yeah, and to be clear, I think I'm only talking about some of the meaning associated with it. I would like the idea of having a regular class that I could go to, or an annual retreat or something like that, where I would meditate and it would get me consistent and in touch with it, because I do benefit from it. I think when people start throwing around the word enlightenment or enlightened or achieved a higher level of consciousness, I start to get a little, I start viewing it differently. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. All right. Because then it almost has these religious context and hierarchical nature that is always admitted to be like, the person who I'm saying has aspired to the Godhead or enlightenment is saying that I have not aspired to enlightenment. It's embedded in all the texts, but that's the model, and we're going to try to follow in your footsteps to get to where you are, which you admit is not any different than me. And I'm just like,
yeah, absolutely.
The same shit you've been doing for 2,000 years, supposedly.
Yeah. I don't mean for this podcast to be segued into completely meditation, but I do totally agree. The reason that Johnny and I gravitate to characters like Daniel Ingram and Gary Weber, who are very much more scientifically minded, Daniel Ingram's an emergency medicine doctor, Gary Weber has been subject and researcher in some of the Harvard neuroscience studies, looking at the fMRI and having functionally different brain states that he can demonstrate and talk about in the neuroscience terms, rather than dressing them up in more hierarchical kind of ways,
Yeah.
is very cool. And as you say, I don't think it's necessary for the practice to take place.